YouTube and LinkedIn as well. So maybe we'll have people watching. Who the hell knows?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Why don't you say your name and your title for me real quick?
My name is Peter Dixon. I'm the CEO of a company called Arkenstone Defense.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Resilience. I'm John Biggs. Today we have Stephen Dixon. He's the CEO of Arkenstone Defense. Welcome, Stephen.
Peter, sorry.
Oh, God damn it. Jesus Christ.
all good. Yeah.
Killing me here. Hold on a second.
No worries. Peter.
Peter.
Peter
Okay.
Dixon and
no, we'll do it. We'll start over again. I'm a moron.
Yeah. But for sure.
All right. Peter Dixon. There you are. Got you. All right.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Resilience. I'm John Biggs. Today we have Peter Dixon. He's the CEO and founder of Arkenstone Defense. Welcome, Peter.
Hey, thank you so much, John. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So tell us about Arkenstone. It's got a pretty cool name. It sounds very Tolkien.
Yeah. Well, also my favorite winery here in the Bay Area. But
okay.
Yeah. So we describe Arkenstone as the most boring company in defense tech, but it's one that we think has a pretty important mission, where fundamentally you can have a capability or technology. We're certainly seeing this with the way that warfare is changing, but a capability that would deter war with China, right? It would deter China from invading Taiwan, for example. And there's going to be somebody in the U.S. Navy who is a gatekeeper on that. And even if you say, hey, this is the most important technology, this will change the outcome of human history, it will deter war, we need it yesterday, he or she is going to bring out their checklist and they're going to go down their Pentagon red tape checklist. And if that company cannot check those boxes, they are not going to even get considered. And so it is that deeply unsexy, deeply bureaucratic process, which is a product of hundreds and thousands of person hours to do all of that bureaucracy. But without that is the point of friction. Without getting that right, the capability that will fundamentally support the young men and women that I used to serve with, that capability will never see the battlefield. Certainly not in a relevant time frame. So that's where we are focused. And where few companies, frankly, are focused.
So the mission here is to allow a small startup building out, I don't know, a weapon system or a drone, UAV, countermeasures, to get to not to the frontal line, but at least get a leg up as they approach the Department of Defense or presumably even NATO, right?
Yeah. So John, I was in Ukraine, maybe about 2 years ago. And we were pretty close to the front lines. And we met a lot of the units that were on the front lines or had just rotated off. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I thought, okay, I have a ton of credibility being here because I have experience in warfare firsthand. And what I realized in meeting those veterans is the level of warfare that they are seeing. I mean, it is sort of through the looking glass combined with World War I, right? And we were talking mostly with volunteer units.
I mean, it sounds almost like Black Mirror, right? It's so futuristic, but still, they're still in the mud.
Yeah, that's right, 100%. You're being hunted by killer drones with AI, but you're also going over the top in trench lines. And these kids volunteered with units of, a dozen other folks coming out of, in some cases, an American tech company that they were working for, or a university, or maybe from a small town together. And 2 or 3 of them would be left. Everybody else would be dead or torn up. And I always thought that the kind of 1,000-yard stare was a sort of a literary device because I hadn't really seen it, even though I've been around a lot of combat vets. These folks all had it. And I realized pretty quickly, that whether it's the 75th Ranger Regiment or a Marine battalion, if you put that on the battlefield today in Ukraine, it hard to imagine that it would last 72 hours based off of the tactics that we still train with and the capability and technology that we still have. So, our military here, and I think that this Pentagon does fully grasp it, but warfare is changing so fast. if we don't change with it, those those forces will be obsolete. Um, so when the Pentagon buys things, they really are partnering with companies,
Hmm.
and then they buy person hours. So they
Yep.
don't buy a joint strike fighter. They buy hundreds of thousands of person hours. They engage those as person hours. They buy those units of measurement, and then that produces a joint strike fighter. And so for us, the form factor that we take is we're a professional employer organization. So we come in some cases, we get described as, say, like a Rippling for defense tech,
Hmm.
which is directionally feels kind of right. But we come in and we wrap these companies. We take their entire back office so that a 40-person drone company, as you pointed out as an example, can actually focus on their product and their capability, and we can take all of that other stuff off their shoulders.
Hmm. Interesting. I mean, it seems like there are a few companies doing this. Is it how vital is this? How like what would it take normally for a company to deal with all this?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have a pretty good sense, right? Because
Hmm.
in a lot of cases, the government accounts for this spend as overhead when they're doing contracts, where they're tracking that taxpayer dollar all the way through. So, this is somewhere around 15 or 20 cents out of every dollar that the government spends with a government contractor is spent on this type of overhead.
Hmm.
And so being able to alleviate that and shrink that is important. This isn't just companies that are trying to be the next Anduril or Palantir.
Hmm.
This is also companies that are second, third generation factory floor companies where the cost of this stuff is expanding. And these companies have been driven down to thin margins over years
Hmm.
and years of cost plus contracts. So they don't have it. So you raise the cost of bureaucracy on them, and it puts them out of business. And I can find the exact numbers, but it's somewhere around maybe 17,000 companies in the last 3 years have been
Hmm.
driven out of the defense industrial base, small and medium companies, by the cost of all of this. So at a time when we desperately need to sustain what we have and expand with new entrants, um, in practice, the opposite is occurring, despite everybody's intentions otherwise. So yeah, very important.
Yeah, fascinating. Like what does a company need to do? I mean, first off, what's the investment check size for a company that could start using you all? Like what do they need to have in the bank to actually start interacting with the DoD?
Yeah. So the great thing for us, being a platform approach where we really are taking the entirety of the back office, is there's a bunch there that you need.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah.
And so we kind of are, we will start you small. When you are small, we will only work to sell you the big ticket items when you actually need them. If there are ways to push those purchases off, we'll help you with that, right? So we're not a one hammer store where everything has to be a nail.
Hmm.
So, it's also from our perspective as we sell to companies, switching your back office is a giant pain, right? And so companies need to do us from a security perspective. They need to do it from, we just have a better business case. And then we de-risk headaches or problems that they haven't had yet from, if they get audited or
Hmm.
those types of approaches. So there's huge reasons to switch to us. It doesn't mean that it's not painful switching your back office. It is, right? And so if we can intercept companies earlier before they've made huge investments in commercial grade stuff to make sure that they're doing it with Pentagon grade stuff, it just becomes easier for us and easier for them. So we're highly incentivized to meet companies where they're at, even if they're 5 people and a dog and
Hmm.
and a few, $100,000 in funding.
What does it take for well, I guess the question is what's happening inside the US government that's allowing these startups to start expanding. I mean, we're looking at the primes, right? We're looking at the Northrop Grummans, we're looking at Boeing, all these guys who are building massive systems. Is there a desire for folks to for startups in the U.S. military? Is that just kind of like, or are they still just going to focus on the primes?
Yeah, I think, John, there aren't a whole bunch of folks from my generation of warfighters
Hmm.
who aren't at some level kind of pissed off,
Hmm.
right? In part, that's because the primes, driven by stock buybacks in order to inflate CEO bonuses, um, took their innovation budget, which is their R&D and their M&A
Hmm.
budget. R&D, as you know, is in big companies tends to be iterative innovation. M&A is you let somebody else take the risk and then have a breakthrough innovation. So M&A is your breakthrough innovations. So those two budgets they cut by like 54%. All of that directly went into stock buybacks
Hmm.
during the global war on terrorism. That was during that period of time. And so, right when we needed them to be adapting the most to be able to account for IEDs and the changing nature of warfare, then, right, they did the opposite. They retrenched and inflated their stock prices. We recognize that that happened, and we're kind of salty about it.
Okay.
Now, those companies are filled with patriots. The incentives or the incentives are not great incentives for in terms of how they act. But the bottom line here is we have a real crunch on our munitions arsenal, and the Pentagon's gone to them, and they're telling them it's going to take 9 years to try and replenish our arsenal. And so defense tech just went from being upside to the Pentagon to actually maybe the only realistic answer on how to get this done. So the substrate, the defense economy substrate, which is what we at Arkenstone focus on, that needs to now be extended to all of these new entrants
Hmm.
and at speed and at scale. So that's what we're focused on.
Are-
There's one other aspect here, John, I'd be remiss in not saying, which is just the Trump administration came in
mhm.
and brought in new blood. Now, our generational war fighters, if say a Democrat had been elected president, we probably would have come into leadership positions in 5 or 10 years.
Yep.
But we're in them now, and so the change makers that you would hope, regardless of political affiliation, the change makers that you would hope that would be in there, actually are in place now, and the change that we've wanted for so long, it's all of us now in those seats actually trying to drive it through.
Does the U.S. have its own Fedorov, like in the Ukraine? Do we have that person who's basically thinks about startups, right? Somebody who's focused on
Yeah,
a startup nation.
John, it's such a good question. Yeah, we do. We have a number of those people.
Hmm. Are
We,
they hidden somewhere?
yeah, yeah. I mean, in some
No,
cases, yeah.
I don't
Right?
want to. I don't want to tip my hat. I don't want to tip my whatever. I don't know what you'd say. I don't want to show my
Political
cards either.
affiliation.
Yeah, political
Gotcha.
affiliation, but
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
I, I would like to hear it from somebody who's in the front lines there.
Yeah. So look, a lot of the media and tech media spotlight focuses on these big personalities who
Hmm.
are in the private sector, but there was a similar level of risk taking, right, from a career perspective and from a breaking with the crowd perspective and all of that on a few key personalities that helped
Hmm.
create defense tech from within inside. So I worked for Drew Kukor, who was a Marine who was basically passed over for command because he was breaking so much glass and getting this stuff done. And so he was hugely responsible for bringing Palantir in. I led the tech engagement efforts for
Hmm.
him and for the Marine Corps, in part because of the counter cartel stuff that I'd done, work and got a chance to work with DARPA and In-Q-Tel and others. And so I thought, oh my God, here's the stuff that we've been missing. You know, um, here we are spending more than the next 9 countries combined, but my lance corporals are on an even playing field with the
Hmm.
Taliban.
Hmm.
How in God's name is that possible? And then I go and I see In-Q-Tel and I'm going, oh, okay, here's where it's at, right? How come it's not closing that last mile of technology transition from pilot to fielding? And so that's really where I focused my career. But there's a maybe a dozen folks that were the change makers that helped create this. Drew Kukawar is one. Joe Larson, who's on my board now, was his deputy, and Joe was hugely responsible early at Palantir, early at Anduril. Lauren Lauren Schmidt wrote the commercial solutions opening
Hmm.
that allowed really DIU to start engaging with companies on commercial terms. I mean, and then Jason Rathje, who's our executive chairman, created the Office of Strategic Capital. But before he did that, he took the $2 billion, or really about a billion of that $2 billion, that was being spent on science projects that never saw daylight, and he repurposed it into commercially viable companies.
Yeah, interesting.
At AFWERX, right?
So yeah,
and so these folks don't get credit, but yeah, we got them, and they've kind of done it. Yeah.
All right. That's all I wanted to hear. I wanted to, I mean, it sounds like we just need to put more of these guys on our stage, to hear from what's going on internally, at the DoD, and folks like you coming out from the inside as well, talking about it, which I think is vital. I think that's important. People need to hear this. What's next for Arkenstone? What do you, yeah, go ahead.
A lot of them are colorful characters as well. They may not have the Hawaiian shirt, but
yeah,
these are folks that, look, at one point and I was engaged in combat at the time, but I spoke up against a commanding officer, right? And I remember my knee just jackhammering up and down, as I'm basically reporting this guy for cowardice. And so that, I was more physically and emotionally fearful in that moment than I was, in a firefight. And so the risk from risking your career, going away from the tribe, doing all that stuff to break glass and make this stuff happen, the risk that these folks took on to succeed in doing this for the good of the country, it's real. And I think sometimes just because they get a government salary, or, hey, they're not staring at the ceiling at night thinking about how they're going to make a payroll, right? They get discounted from an entrepreneurial perspective. I don't know that that's totally fair.
Okay. Fascinating. So let's go back to Arkenstone. What's next for you guys?
Yeah. So, for us, we're trying to move fast. We recognize the moment that we're in terms of, the need for this. So, having built a successful company previously, there was a thought on just, hey, I know what I'm doing. Maybe kind of go it alone. I went the opposite way. I found a bunch of the most credible people I could find, most of whom were not available. They were all supposed to go off and do other things. In many cases, they were supposed to go off and be CEOs of other companies. And I made this pitch of, hey, how would you like, instead of being your own CEO, come be a CTO, or come be a COO, or what have you for me. And let's go build the most boring company in defense tech on this problem and nobody else wants to deal with. Because if we don't get this right, it's the ball game. And these billions of dollars that are being put into companies in the defense tech space, if we don't find a way to get these from the sort of kiddie pool of defense innovation spend into actually the congressionally appropriated programmatic spend that requires all these gating functions to get through, if we don't get that, future generations of warfighters will never see this influx of money and capability and talent, human talent, again. And so we got to figure out, how do we make sure that as much as possible of it does actually transition. It's the right thing to do.
Fascinating. All right. So where can folks, do you have any, you have a newsletter, blogs, or anything that people can check out?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just go to Arkenstone Defense, you'll find it all there. You can sign up for all of that. And part of what we're doing is trying to focus on this hidden layer of cost and transition and all of that kind of stuff. That how does this actually work? So if you are a sort of systems type thinker and that's of interest to you, what is the process for these things? How does stuff actually happen? We're a great resource, because that's what we think about all day long, right? Not the sexy warheads on foreheads, but how do you make sure that this thing actually scales?
All right, excellent. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for this. It's been fascinating. I'm glad we got to see inside the other side of the pond, I guess you'd say.
Well, John, listen, I'm a huge fan of who you are and what you do, and being an entrepreneur is sometimes a lonely endeavor. like everybody who does this, who, for instance, has a family or those things, you make real sacrifices to do this. And so having a sense that there are other people out there who are building, who are tinkering, who are trying to make it happen, who are tilting at windmills. I
Mhm.
remember somebody in my last company said, "My gosh, did you ever think that we would be here?" Right? We found success, and I was like, "Yeah, I mean, this is why I was doing it."
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so you have to have that sort of unrelenting belief that, hey, this is gonna work. Or your ability to deal with failure grinds you down. And the thing that I have fundamentally seen, whether it was how do I select people for an elite unit in the military, is or for this is you don't want those fair weather warriors, right?
Mhm.
You want folks where everything is going wrong. That dumpster is on, or the office is on fire, and you can find somebody who takes another sip of that coffee and rolls up their sleeves and gets to work. And so being able to not shy away from that and put kind of an Instagram filter on what is a tough entrepreneurial journey is really important work. And I know that there are a lot of entrepreneurs that credit what you have done with how they think about their resilience. And,
Yeah.
and so thank you.
I'm glad somebody noticed. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All
Hey,
right.
pleasure getting to meet you. And
All right.
I look forward to staying in touch. And thank you for everybody who's
All right.
tuning in to see this.
All right.
Good to see you.
All right. This has been Resilience. I'm John Biggs. We'll see you next time.